Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the GSoC Heat Barcamp 8.0, organized by GNU Linux Users Group. We're excited to have you all here for another insightful session as part of this incredible event. I am Akriti Goyal, and I'll be your host today, representing GNU Linux Users Group and IT Durgapur, a community that thrives on collaboration and innovation in open source. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Mr. Indraneel Ghosh. Indraneel is currently a software engineer at Google and has previously worked as an SDE2 at Amazon. He has been actively contributing to open source since 2021 and was also a GSoC mentor in 2022, making significant contributions to the developers community. We are really glad to have you, sir, with us today. Could you share a bit about how you got started in tech and what led you to explore open source?
Right. So I started in tech like in my first year with the traditional computer programming course that everyone takes up. And then I did a little bit of competitive programming and machine learning on the side. So I first started exploring open source because one of my friends had participated in GSoC in the first year and he had gotten through right in the first year itself. And at the same time, there was a thriving open source community in my college where people were encouraged to participate in open source and take part in GSoC. So those were the primary motivations for me to get started with contributing to open source and eventually participating in GSoC.
We really appreciate you sharing that. Your experiences offer valuable insights, especially for those looking to get involved in open source. I'm sure everyone is eager to hear more about your role as a GSoC mentor. How has that experience shaped your perspective on open source contributions, and what advice would you give to aspiring contributors?
Uh, Purely as a mentor or as a mentor as well as a student? Like,
So, like both, if you want to share.
okay, fine. So, from a mentor's perspective, if you are applying to GSoC, I'll just share how the traditional mentor model works. So, Google will traditionally fund a certain set of project slots. So, for an org, that might be three or four slots, or if it is a big, well-established org, it may be 10 slots. Something like Zulip probably gets like 30, 40 slots. I don't remember what it is now. But basically, once these slots are provided to the org may choose to fund any project of their choice. So typically, an applicant will come and contribute to the project for a few months, and then eventually they'll write a proposal. So based on every org has its own metrics, but based on contributions and proposals, the org will generally identify which projects they want to fund. So there is a bunch of parameters that goes into it. One being, is the project important for the org? The other being, is the list of proposals they have gotten for the project good enough, and do they trust the developer to finish it off in the project time frame? And the third thing is obviously number of slots and so on and so forth. And obviously, there are with bigger projects like Zulip, there will be multiple candidates applying to the same project. So you will typically have scoring done by multiple mentors on the proposal and the work this candidate has done, and then they will pick the best candidate according to what they see fit. So that is typically how the selection and project allocation works. So if you are an applicant, try to pick projects with higher priority or medium priority. They may be like harder to solve, but they are the most likely to get a slot in the final application. So if you pick a low priority project and someone has picked a high priority project, and both the proposals are equally good, the higher priority project will get funded, and like the candidate with the high priority project gets sent to GSOC. But this may depend on org to org. This is like a general mental model that I had observed during my mentor with the org that I done. So every org may have a slightly different mental model. So, but in general, that is how projects work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Setting up the project locally and understanding the code base is an important part in GSoC. What strategies did you find effective in understanding a project's code base, especially when dealing with large and complex projects?
So generally, most projects will have a decent to good documentation. If you are working on an entirely new package, then that's a easier problem to solve because you don't have a previously available code base to work on. But if it is an existing code base, the easiest way to get started is pick on one of the starter bugs that are available and someone else is not working on actively. So go to that issue, add a comment that can I start working on this, and typically someone from the community will um, assign that issue to you. Then solve that starter issue within a few weeks, and once you start solving it, you'll check out the package and do all the setup by following the documentation. If you come across any issues, that will get resolved either by you looking at the logs of the error or talking to the community. So do your homework and then drop a message in the community. So once you solve the first issue, your setup and everything associated with the developer environment is done. Then I would advise that if it is a popular project, go and talk to the mentors and tell them that I'm interested in working on this particular project. Can you assign bugs that work on the code base adjacent to this or in the same code base? So typically, you don't need to know the entire code base. You just need to know what the part of the code base that you would be working on if you submit a project proposal in GitHub. So that's about it. And I think the developer tooling is pretty standard and you can look it up online depending on the project. So you should have your debuggers and breakpoints and everything to set up depending on the language you're coding on. And the community in general for all projects are pretty helpful and they'll help you along the way if needed. But yeah, that's the way to go about it. Pick a starter bug, set up your project, and eventually, once you have solved the starter bug, try picking bugs in the code area where you plan to submit your project proposal.
So, how to approach the mentor?
So once you have identified the org and the project that you will be working on, um, there will obviously be like three or four orgs that you have identified, and you will eventually potentially submit proposal to two or three of them, depending on how much bandwidth you have. Mm. So once you have identified the orgs, go and just if it's a setup that you are doing and then you are stuck, then add an introduction message saying, "Hi, I'm from this college. These are my achievements, so on and so forth, and this is what I would want to do. There are this is my query, and can someone in the community help solve this issue?" So, like your opening statement needs to show that you have done your research on the issue that you are facing, and then the community is generally receptive to answering and helping you out. At the same time, if during the setup and initial bug solving, if you don't come across any issues and then you want to introduce yourself, so you can just say that I solved this bug and this is the project I'm interested in contributing to. So that is a good way to introduce yourself. So this is basically your elevator pitch. Why should the community spend time on helping you? So ensure that you list out your achievements and what you are doing currently, which year you are, and so on and so forth, and what you have done for the org so far. Like, or if you have a query, then list that out. So that's about it. And mentors are generally helpful. And as and when you keep solving more and more issues, you become the mentors sort of know who you are in the community and they will help you out naturally. So that's how it works.
So, which platform can we approach? Slack or GitHub or any other platform?
So every org will have its own platform for chat channels. And if you typically what happens is if you drop a message in the wrong group, they will let you know that this is not the right group. Or at the same time, you may not receive a response. If you are not receiving a response, try to approach them in a different community. And generally, a community that is active, let's say if it is a Slack channel, then there will be a series of messages and discussions ongoing. So you can sort of gauge which community you are, which channel you want to talk to them in. Like there are Gitter and a bunch of other communication tools that platforms use. So try out all of them, and like don't drop a message on each and every one of them right away. Drop on one of them, the one which seems more active, and then keep going from there. Yeah.
From your experience as a GSoC mentor, what are the key factors that mentors and organizations prioritize when evaluating a contributor's performance? How can participants ensure their work stands out?
So are you referring to once the candidate is selected, or is it pre-selection?
So, pre selection.
Okay. So before you're selected, typically, if you have high visibility, like you have solved a lot of bugs, or if you have actually solved high priority bugs for the organization, that's when the org mentors will know you. That is one of the ways to do it. And finally, when the mentors sit on evaluating your proposal, like there are a lot of proposals to choose from. One obviously is the bias that comes with certain degree of bias that comes with working with a person. So that will be in the mind of a mentor that this person has solved these many bugs, so on and so forth. So that helps, but like most of the weight is on the proposal. So if you have not written a good proposal, odds are you won't get selected. So it is important to have a great proposal. And if there are like two candidates with equally good proposal, then your contributions to the community, maybe you helping another person out in the community or something, like you solving a lot of bugs, all of that come into the picture. But having a good proposal is important. Like if you do all the other community stuff, like asking the right questions, solving a lot of bugs, and helping others out, but your proposal isn't great, then someone with a great proposal might get selected. So, but different orgs weigh differently. Certain orgs will obviously index more on someone who's written the proposal really well, versus certain orgs will index on who's contributing to the community more. So, it's not a one rule fits all kind of a solution. Uh, Depending on the org, what you can do is try to reach out to folks who have uh, probably not mentors, unless there are student mentors who are no longer associated with the org, but try to reach out to folks who have been students at that org, and they'll give you a flavor of how that org works.
Okay, thank you, sir. How do you approach a situation where a contributor is falling behind or struggling to meet expectations?
So this is generally when someone is selected and midway through the program, so generally the checkpoints are defined at the start of the program. So there's generally a midway checkpoint, and if it is a bigger project, there might be multiple checkpoints. But in the traditional GSOC that is 3 months long, you have a midway checkpoint and the final checkpoint. So there are goals defined for each of the checkpoints, and depending on your org, you may meet weekly, bi-weekly, or in certain orgs, like the expectation is you are completely independent and they just meet you at the checkpoint. So typically, you should have a bi-weekly or a weekly sync with your mentors, and in that, if like as a mentor, if I observe the candidate is not making progress, like the goal is to try and understand what is blocking them. The expectation is as a mentor is generally that candidates actually want to finish off the project in the timelines and they want to meet the goals. So there are two things you can do. So the mid if the candidate is not meeting all the goals by midpoint check the mid checkpoint review, then you can sort of move some of the goals to the final review and work with the candidate to understand where are they blocked, what are the issues they are facing, so on and so forth. um, that is one thing that mentors might do. And at the same time, it is as a candidate, it is important to communicate that you're stuck, like either through Slack or the communication channel, or through the one-on-ones that you have on a weekly basis. Like typically your mentors are there to help you succeed, so reach out to them as often as you can, and mentors are there to unblock you and help you out. At times they will sit with you and debug the issue if like you are stuck somewhere and not able to move forward. So yeah, that's about it. Like as a mentor, your job is just to unblock the candidate and ensure that the project is successful and the candidate gets the final certificate of GSoC.
Yeah. Great to hear, sir. So, what advice do you have for balancing GSOC with academic responsibilities, especially for students who may have exams or other commitments?
Right. So I'm not sure about how it works in your college, but I would assume that you guys have GSoC in the summer, right? Not, and you don't have exams in the summer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so like pre GSoC is where the challenge generally is, like you have to contribute to the org as well as do your exam. So in most cases, I've seen there are two ways to go about it. One, you try to do GSoC in a semester where you do not have a lot of courses. So I did it in my final year where I didn't have a lot of coursework and exams. You may have projects, but projects are typically easier to manage than exams. You don't have to actually study before an exam. You don't have that deadline to work with. Whereas in case if there you have exams, then there is a good chance your grades will take a hit that semester, and you have to be prepared for that. But the best way to plan is like if you don't have surprise tests, then you know where the exams are. So um, for my college in my batch, generally there were fewer surprise tests, or there were surprise tests on every other Monday or so. So you know when the test is coming. So you can plan your schedule accordingly. So typically try and contribute on Fridays and Saturdays on longer periods of time, like say, probably 5, 6 hours, 7 hours, whatever, and on the other days you can focus on your academics. But this is not a blanket idea. Like someone may take more time to understand a particular code base, so in the initial days spend that time, and then because typically you'll start at the start of the semester and then you have fewer exams at the start of the semester, the load is less. So once or you can start in the winter break as well. There are folks who do that as well. So once your initial ramp up is completed, you will have to put in lesser number of hours. But plan time box your efforts for GSOC in a proper scheduled manner. Like do it on a weekend or do it in a way that your exams are not affected as much as possible. If you have a midterm, you have a midterm. Like you have to then take a call. Do you want to focus on doing your GSOC work, and or do you want to like do the midterm and then get back to it? And mentors generally understand that students have other academic commitments. So if it is not a very competitive work, then you should be fine. Like if you plan your time out, you should be fine. But GPAs generally, from my experience, most people's GPAs take a hit in that GSOC semester. Yeah.
So that's great time management lessons you gave us. So besides GSOC, how was your industrial experience in Amazon and Google?
So at Google, I've recently started, so I'm still ramping up. At Amazon, I had a lot of fun. Like the project, so Amazon in general is fast paced, and you get to have a lot of ownership, even as an SD intern or SD1. So depending on your team, in my case, I worked on two teams where there were a lot of there was a lot of code writing. It was mostly application development sort of code, back end and front end, but I got to learn a lot and like ship quickly. I think I had a good experience at both these companies because you have a good peer group. At the same time, you have a decent internal community for whatever you want to look up. But at the same time, Amazon encourages people to be independent and figure things out on their own. So like that forces you to actually self study and figure things out rather than asking for help or find like looking for tutorials. You won't be spoon fed things, but at the same time, if you are blocked, people will help you out. So I had a good time at Amazon, and a lot of the projects that I launched had good impact. So yeah, I learned a lot as well, like from a coding perspective, and in terms of managing stakeholders and different people from different walks of the business, like product managers, program managers, all of that. You sort of learn to manage expectations of the business as well as your tech leadership and the tech team as well. So yeah, I think it is more management and writing docs than writing code. Like as you start off as an intern, you write more code, but generally as you go up the ladder, it's more right aligning expectations, writing design docs, and less of writing code. But yeah, that's about it. Like I had a good time, and Amazon and Google is famous for its works, and the work is also really good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. So how much programming knowledge should we have to participate in GSOC? This C
So,
plus.
yeah, sorry, go ahead, complete.
Sir, you can start.
Okay, so basically, if you know a language well enough and you have time on your hands, you can get started. So there are, like, I broadly classify orgs into three categories. One is the org that requires a lot of background knowledge, like if you are working on compilers, for example. Like LLVM is one such project where you need to know a lot of background knowledge on how compilers work to make a meaningful contribution. And those are the orgs where you have typically masters, PhD students applying. You can always apply. There are undergrads who also get through as well, but generally it is harder to get in there. But let's say you have just a programming language knowledge, so you can go for orgs that have frameworks that are less popular. Like let's say there's a framework that is only used in the astronomy community or bioinformatics community. So uh, there everyone is on the same level playing field because everyone has to learn the framework and then get started. And then there are projects, so those are the easiest ones if you just have a strong understanding of a programming language. So because everyone is at the same level playing field, you can learn and then deliver. Yeah. Whereas if you are doing Android development or front end or back end, uh, core back end, like not on a popular framework like Juice or Spring or whatever, um, in those cases you need, it is helpful to have that prior knowledge of the framework Android, because there will be candidates who have spent half a year or year just learning Android and they will have an head start. Or you can just learn it on the fly and learn it in parallel. But I would recommend, if you really want to get into the program and you have just language knowledge, apply to orgs which have frameworks that are not super popular. And if you have framework knowledge, then apply to orgs that want that framework. So play to your strengths. Like if you know compilers, then that's a very fairly rare skill, and you can just go and apply to LLVM and you'll get through mostly. Yeah. So play to your strengths, and um, there are tags for each of the projects, like what are the skill sets are needed. So look at that and filter out orgs you want to apply to.
Thank you, sir. So we got a question from audience.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
The Vivan Agarwal asks, what projects did you work on GSoC and what different tech have you worked on?
Right. So in GSoC, I worked on basically a library that is used in for bioinformatics research for doing something called as an enrichment analysis. So this is basically a standard analysis that is done on for a lot of research papers that are written. So um, the library that I built out is basically like part of a web app. So there's something called Cytoscape. You can look it up. So the way it works is Cytoscape has a bunch of libraries that plug into the core Cytoscape module, and then an app runs where a bioinformatics researcher can run, say, an enrichment analysis, which was something I worked on. So, from a conceptual point of view, it was mostly learning the Cytoscape framework for me and knowing the API documentation for the APIs I want to hit for doing enrichment analysis. And I think the second part of the question was what technologies I've worked on, right? Oh,
Yes, sir.
yeah. So, like in GSoC, my project was pretty much, if the only skill set that you needed to know really well was the language, so Java in my case. So you can Cytoscape was required to be learned, but it was something that is not a very popular framework like um, Juice, React, or something like that. So that was something people would learn on their own, and by looking at documentation or taking help from the community. There are mentors, and like there are fairly senior mentors who have written the library themselves, so they will help you out if something is not documented and you're stuck at any point. So I think in that case, that was one of the tech stacks I worked on. Other than that, at Amazon, I worked on a lot of things actually. React. I worked on React. I worked on Python systems built on Python a little bit, like anything that you study in your courses for ML, you can think of that. And then Amazon has a lot of Java code, so I worked on that as well. And Google right now, so I've recently started. So Google, my team's open source work is generally involved with writing Golang code and Terraform code.
So there's
So those
another
are the
question.
basic steps. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Thank you,
ahead.
sir. So Kumar Utkarsh is asking, what is the roadmap for first years? Like how should they start?
So like people who generally clear GSoC in their first year, they have a certain amount of background knowledge. They have done programming in their high school. At least they know one language really well. Some folks actually have built out apps and all of that, so they have that head start. If you are a person who has never written code, I would say that for, I think first year you focus on getting your fundamentals right, like learning how to solve simple algorithmic problems, and try to prepare for GSoC in the summer. That comes after the first year. Typically, if people don't do internships in the first year summer, so you have time to ramp up on the skill set, and you can look at the projects that were selected in the last year. However, if you are like really motivated and you can somehow manage to make time, then if you do not have a programming course in your first semester, learn programming on your own, and in the second semester, pick a project that has a low entry barrier and learn the skills on the fly. But it is hard to write a good proposal in the first year, I feel. But obviously, there are exceptions to the rule.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That was the questions from audience. So looking back at your GSOC journey, is there anything you would have done differently or any advice you would give to your younger self?
So I had a lot of free time in my second year, I would say. So compared to other years, and in my final year when I did GSOC, I was also doing working on my Amazon internship. Like before, there was some time overlap, and I was applying to GSOC, and I was also doing my Amazon internship. So time management was more challenging there. I would have probably tried to do it in my second year because in the second year you are most free. Like the first year summer you don't have a proper internship, so you can learn the skill set and apply to GSOC in your second year. And it helps the most because when you are setting for your internship or placement season, you have a unique project of Google Summer of Code to present on your resume. Most people, like, I would think there are probably 8 or 10 people in the best case in your batch who have done GSOC by their second year. Maybe if you are in an institute where a lot of GSOC people get selected, 20 candidates would be there by the second year who have cleared GSOC. So that project generally stands out on your resume. So do it in your second year. It adds value in your third year internships and placements. So I would have done it in my second year in an ideal scenario. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
only thing. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So if a contributor's GSOC project doesn't reach its intended goal by the end of the summer, how do you help them view the experience positively? And also, what lessons do you impart to them in such cases?
So, like generally, as mentors, they most mentors would want their candidate to succeed. In general, what happens if we see that the candidate will not be able to meet the goal? It depends on how every org evaluates it. So, the scope of the project may be reduced, or right now, I think GSOC also provides the option to extend your project to a longer project. I had looked it up, and that's a new thing that they provided. I'm not sure if you can do it mid project, but if you can, then your mentor has the discretion to do that. However, like if you're unsuccessful as a mentor, like you can point out the areas where the candidate could have improved, and they can apply next year and get in. I think that's about it. Like, if generally in most scenarios, from what I've observed, the candidates who do not complete the project either had a very challenging project and they did not have the background to finish it off, or they sort of gave up midway. Like the second scenario is more common than the first one. The first one is extremely rare. Like people just give up midway. So if you're signing up for GSOC, it is advisable to stay committed to finish it off by 3 months. And the stipend is good. If you don't get like if you do not pass the evaluation, your efforts are not valued as much. So I think yeah, those are the things you can do as a mentor. You can provide them guidance on what they could have done better and ask them to apply next year.
Okay, thank you, sir. That was great to hear. Could you share how your GSOC influenced your career trajectory, particularly in terms of networking, job opportunities, or developing relationships with peers in the tech community?
Right. So GSOC has this model where you will have community sync ups with whichever community you're part of. So let's say I work with an org called NRNG. So there were sync ups that they would organize once or twice. So I ended up meeting a lot of developers across the um, world, like not just based out of India. And there were a few developers I met from India as well who are good friends outside of GSoC now. And at the same time, your mentors can write you a letter of recommendation, and at the same time, like you can maintain a good relationship with the mentor and come back to the community and contribute projects. So it's basically your networking will help you build relationships, and those relationships will may or may not, like I won't say will, but they may help you down the line. So it may help you get a letter of recommendation if you're applying to a university abroad, or even applying to a job. Like if someone works at a certain company and they have worked with you, quite often, if you are referring someone to a company, there is a section why should I refer this person. So they can write a more personalized statement. So I think those are the things that help, like broadly. And at the same time, like if it is a remotely popular open source project, you it is a cool project on your resume, and you get shortlisted for interviews and so on and so forth. For example, like if you contributed to Redis, and pretty much all the three cloud providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure, have Redis as a offering. So it helps you get noticed by recruiters who are recruiting for those teams. So yeah, I think those are the ways it helps, and you learn a lot as well. That is separate. You learn how to write good quality code and all of that.
Okay.
So those should the primary motivation should be like, according to me, at least, like should be writing good code and learning how software is written in the real world, so that you l- develop those practices internally, and it helps you future in your future career. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So, the future of GSOC. In your opinion, where do you see GSOC heading in the future? Are there any trends or changes in open source that you think will shape how students contribute in upcoming years?
So GSoC has, from what I've been observing, GSoC has become more and more open to accepting applicants from all backgrounds. Like, so earlier when I did GSoC, there was a rule that you need to be a student. Now, like Google identified that not everyone gets to go to university. So, and there are people who are working in a different job role or job family, and they want to try out coding. So the program has become more and more inclusive. So I think one of the things that will happen is, like, and that is already happening, is the program becomes more inclusive, and like the rest is dependent on how um, Google chooses to fund the program. Like, I think that's pretty much it. And there are community sync ups that happen, so they have been growing in frequency over the years. So most of them still happen in US and Europe, the official ones at least, but the number of community sync ups has been growing. So I think those are the ways it is going as a program. Like it's becoming more inclusive, and you have people from diverse backgrounds, not just people from university or people who study computer science. You have folks who are self-taught programmers, or even, I think the rule is you cannot be over 18. You have to be over 18. Sorry, like if you're under 18, there is a program called Google Coding. But if you're above 18 and you didn't go to university, or you're still in school, you can still participate. So the you get people from more varying backgrounds. That is how I see the program shaping.
So, will you think there would be any drastic change in the GSOC pattern?
That is hard to answer. Like, I am not part of the organizing community, so but in general, I haven't seen any trends where the older format has been done away with. Like, we still have those projects where you contribute from May to August, and they have increased the number of projects based on the community feedback. So if an open source organization says that there are projects that candidates cannot finish in the traditional summer period, they have introduced those large term projects, and I don't see any major changes happening in the near future. I would be surprised if there are.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we again have a question from audience.
Yeah, go on.
So Sanskriti is asking you, how was your college experience?
I had a good experience in bits. Like bits allows you a lot of autonomy to do whatever you want to do because there's no strict attendance criteria as such, and at the same time, there is a good thriving startup culture. So if you basically whatever you want to do, bits does give you the tools to do it, but at the same time, you need to. It's also a responsibility because um, at any given day there are 10 different events happening, and you need to decide what you want to do. Like, do you want to go to a startup meetup, or do you want to participate in some extracurricular activity, or like do you want to not attend class and do something more important? So it's both a benefit and a responsibility, and I think in general the alumni community from WITS is pretty solid. So I had a good experience in college, and yeah, that's about it. Like, I'm happy in that event a bit. So I'll just put it that way. Yeah.
Would you like to share one thing like this should not be done in college? Like what are your good things and bad things you took from college? That
So
like the lessons you understood.
ideally, like you should not study like just before the exam, but that pretty much always ends up happening. Like you start like putting in all nighters just to finish off the course is not very healthy. So, but that is what will typically end up happening in most cases. And like colleges, even bits in most scenarios, most of the courses are very exam focused rather than project focused. So, like you have to work with that. Like, in an ideal world, it would be better if there were more weightage to projects and building things because at the end of the day, once you join an industry or even if you do research, you are evaluated on what you're building rather than just an exam that you wrote. But yeah, I mean, not figuring, having a clear understanding of what your goals are. So if you want to build a startup, go all in on that. Like focus on that. Like if you want to go the traditional route of going through placements, getting a job, so focus on doing that rather than trying multiple different things for too long. Like I tried a lot of things well into my third year, so try whatever you want to try out by your second year and identify what you want to specialize in your third year and fourth year. I think that is what I would have done separately and not studying last minute for exams. Yeah,
Thank you, sir. That we'll like to include in our daily lives right now.
yeah, sure.
So a question from audience: are you still doing contributions?
To open source, it has reduced, but like my team at Google still does open source, so I participate as part of that. But in general, like most of the open source work, like projects or anything I do, are still private personal projects. I do them in my private repos. Pretty much, yeah. Like I occasionally still answer questions on different communities, like when I was at Amazon, I would answer questions in AWS CDK communities. So I'm no longer actively involved with the Cytoscape or the NRNV project, but I do occasionally contribute to different programs, open source programs like AWS CDK or Google's programs that are open source. So yeah, but once you're working on a job, it becomes more challenging to write code during the day on your job as well as do open source. And most of the open source you'll do is probably like hobby projects or things you want to build personally rather than contributing to a bigger project. There are obviously exceptions, but do not work on bigger communities that are outside of the company I'm working for.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So Vivan Agarwal is again asking a question. He is saying, any one piece of advice for first years?
I think I sort of answered it. Like, if you have a programming, in general, the advice would be like explore a lot in your first year. Do try getting into different clubs, committees, so on and so forth. Like if you are a CS major, you don't necessarily need to do computer science. You can get into finance or something else. So explore and figure out what you like, and like it's fine to try out 10 different things and 8 of those things or even 10 of those things not working out for you. But at the same time, give sufficient time to your academics as well because you're it's the easiest to get a high GPA in your first year. Like that has been my experience. Like scoring GPA in a branch like computer science electronics will become harder as you get into your second, third, and fourth year because in the first year you are competing with the entire batch, so it is easier to get a GPA. And professors are also generally a little bit more relaxed in grading in the first year. So like balance both of them out, like try out different things, but at the same time just give enough time to academics to ensure your GPA doesn't drop too much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you once again, sir, for taking out time to share your expertise with us today. We truly appreciate the valuable insights you have provided. Before we conclude, we would be honored to hear your thoughts on today's session. How did you find the discussion?
I think I enjoyed the discussion, and like if anyone else has any particular questions on GSoC that were not answered, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or something. Like I'll answer them on chat. So I had a good discussion with the team, and a lot of the questions were slightly unorthodox, and I had to think about and how I should answer them. So I had a good discussion. Yeah.
Sir, do you have any final reflection or advice for those of us looking to make the meaningful contributions to the open source community?
So like I would say like GSoC or any of these programs can be a motivator to get started, but that should not be the only motivation for you. Like pick a project that you are at least passionate about in some sense of the word, some sense of the idea, because um, otherwise you won't feel motivated after a point of time. There should be some motivation, either like that project is making lives of someone simpler, or you simply like the complexity of the project. Have another motivation other than just getting into GSoC and getting that certificate.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.